Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Deuteronomy chapter 28 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Now I have to tell you right up front, this specific chapter is easily one of the most intense, vivid, and consequential texts you'll find in the entire Hebrew Bible. It lays out the absolute highest highs, and I mean the absolute peak of prosperity, alongside the most terrifying lows for the Israelites. It details exactly what is going to happen, depending on how they choose to uphold their covenant with God.
To really wrap our heads around this chapter, we first have to look at exactly where we are in the story. So picture this. The Israelites are standing right at the very edge of the Promised Land. They haven't even crossed the Jordan River yet. And right here, at this massive turning point, Moses presents them with the ultimate legal contract of their covenant. This isn't just some basic list of rules. It is an incredibly clear, stark, cause and effect roadmap for their entire future as a nation. It's the final, binding agreement before they step foot in and take possession of the land.
So, here is our agenda for this explainer. First, chapter context. Second, the blessings. Third, the curses. Fourth, clarifications. Fifth, practical life lessons. And finally, a recap. Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, Context, the edge of the Promised Land.
Moving to Section 2, the blessings. This covers verses 1 through 14.
Before we dive into the specific blessings, it's really important to remember that this entire chapter essentially operates as one massive if-then statement. Verse 1 makes it perfectly clear. It basically says, if you diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord and observe His commandments, then God is going to set you high above all the nations of the earth. So we begin with these magnificent rewards in the first 8 verses. And the crucial Hebrew word repeated over and over here is baruch, meaning blessed, or infused with divine life and absolute abundance. Verses 3 through 6 show us just how comprehensive this reward is. It literally touches every single aspect of daily life. The text says, "Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field." Think about what that means. It means you will have prosperity whether you're living in a bustling, crowded trade center or out working out in the agricultural lands. It promises that the fruit of your body, the fruit of your land, and the fruit of your cattle are all going to multiply. Your basket and your kneading trough, which basically represents your daily food supply, will always be completely full. You'll never go hungry. Furthermore, verse 7 promises that any enemies who try to rise up against you, well, they might come at you from one direction, but they will be so completely, overwhelmingly defeated that they will scatter and flee from you in 7 different ways. Moving through verses 9 to 14, we see the text expand from just basic daily survival to a state of absolute national elevation. Verse 9 states that God will establish you as a holy people to Himself exactly as He swore. And by verse 12, this blessing reaches a truly cosmic scale. The text says the Lord will open His good treasure, the heavens, to give rain to your land in its proper season. Now, because of this overflowing massive abundance, it says you will actually lend to many nations and borrow from none. You'll be the economic powerhouse. And the ultimate promise arrives right here in verse 13. God promises to make Israel the head and not the tail. They will be above only and not beneath. It's an absolute peak of prosperity, complete security, and unparalleled global standing. But, and this is the key, it is fully dependent on keeping those commandments. Which brings us to Section 3, the curses, verses 15 through 68.
Now we have to tackle the severe consequences of breaking this sacred covenant, starting at verse 15. You can think of this section essentially as the ultimate breach of contract clause. And I want you to notice the brilliant, albeit terrifying visual symmetry here. The text uses a direct reversal of fortunes to heavily emphasize strict cause and effect. Where that first section repeated the word baruch, this section repeats the Hebrew word arur, which means cursed. Look at verse 16. It explicitly reverses verse 3. It says, "Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field." The basket, cursed. The womb, cursed. You're coming in and you're going out, completely cursed. Literally everything that was promised as a beautiful blessing in verses 1 through 14 is precisely, point for point, inverted into a penalty in verses 15 through 19.
From verse 20 all the way through 35, the curses escalate. It's a logical, step-by-step unraveling. We see a complete breakdown of both the physical body and the surrounding environment. In verse 22, the text uses very specific, intense Hebrew terms for these physical afflictions. Words like shakafet, which means a wasting disease, and kadachat, a burning fever. But the afflictions aren't just physical. That's what makes this so intense. Verses 28 and 29 describe a horrific psychological breakdown, warning that God will strike the people with shigion, which translates to madness, ivaron, meaning blindness, and tamahon love, a profound confusion or astonishment of the heart. Basically, losing your grip on reality. The text then goes on to describe an agonizing state of complete powerlessness. It says, you're going to plant a vineyard, but not get to eat from it. You'll build a house, but someone else is going to live in it. It describes a society that is totally stripped of its security, continuously oppressed and constantly robbed by others without any way to stop it.
And then we get this incredibly vivid, terrifying imagery specifically found in verses 23 and 24, which perfectly captures the inescapable drought and famine that marks this first major phase of disaster. Listen to this. When the sky over your head is like bronze, it means it is completely sealed shut. Not a single drop of rain is going to fall. And when the ground beneath you is like iron, it means the earth is far too hard to plow, to plant, or to harvest. The text says the rain of the country will actually turn into dust and powder. This is absolute, total agricultural devastation. And we have to remember, in the ancient world, that meant immediate starvation and total economic collapse.
Continuing on from verse 36 through 48, the text warns that the Israelites will be driven away to a nation they don't even know, literally becoming an object of horror and a proverb among the peoples, just a cautionary tale. And then, as we reach verses 49 through 57, the consequences reach an absolutely horrifying climax. It says a fierce nation from far away, whose language they do not understand, will swoop down on them like an eagle. These enemies will lay a devastating siege to all their cities. And folks, we read of horrifying siege conditions here. Conditions where even the most gentle and sensitive citizens succumb to unthinkable, horrific acts of desperation. Verse 53 plainly states that in the deep starvation of the siege, the people will actually turn on each other, secretly eating the very flesh of their own children. It is deeply, deeply disturbing to read. But it is meant to be. It's deliberately showing the absolute bottom of human degradation that happens when the fabric of a society completely unspools.
Finally, we reached the last stretch of curses, detailed in verses 58 through 68. This outlines the absolute ultimate consequence, which is a heartbreaking undoing of the Exodus itself. If they refuse to observe the law, verses 65 through 67 tell us they will be scattered among all nations, and there they won't find any rest. They're going to live with a trembling heart, failing eyes, and a completely despairing soul. The text says your life will hang in doubt before you, and you'll be terrified night and day. And then, in verse 68, comes the ultimate devastating blow. The Lord will send them back to Egypt in ships. God had previously promised they would never, ever see Egypt again. But here, the ultimate punishment is a return to their original bondage, offering themselves up as slaves to their enemies. But the text adds one final shocking detail. It says no one will even want to buy them.
Let's move to section 4, clarifications, explaining the harshness. So, you might be sitting there wondering why in the world this text shifts to such an extreme and frankly incredibly harsh tone. Reading through 54 verses of relentless curses is a heavy, emotionally draining experience. But if we look purely at the Peshat, which is the simple, plain, literal meaning of the text, we see that this is actually a standard ancient covenantal warning. In the ancient Near East, it was incredibly common for treaties between a great overlord and a lesser vassal, these are often called suzerainty treaties, to include exactly this kind of structure. You'd have a list of blessings for loyalty, and then a much longer, highly graphic list of curses for rebellion. So this is a binding legal contract showing the absolute highest possible stakes. God is making the reality of their choices undeniably crystal clear. I also want to quickly clarify the role of the stranger mentioned in verse 43. The text uses the Hebrew word ger, which refers to the alien or the non-Israelite living among the people. Verse 43 warns that the ger in your midst will mount up above you higher and higher, and you shall come down lower and lower. What this means is that losing the covenant means the entire social order flips completely upside down. The Israelite nation, which was supposed to be the head, as we heard earlier, becomes so impoverished and subjugated that the immigrants and foreigners living among them become the primary lenders and the people holding all the power.
Section 5. Key simple ideas. Distilling the message.
So, what is the crucial point we can extract from this massive, overwhelming chapter? It's simply that obedience brings deep connection and life, while disobedience breeds terrifying, unmanageable chaos. God is the source of order, of rain, of fertility and protection. When Israel breaks the covenant, God doesn't necessarily have to actively destroy them, He simply removes that divine protection. And this brilliantly illustrates the real turning point of the entire chapter, which is found in verse 47. This is such a striking quote. It reveals the true root cause of the disaster. It is taking incredible blessings and immense prosperity entirely for granted. The text doesn't say the curses come just because they broke some minor technical rule.
No, the curses come because when they had absolutely everything, when they had food, peace, prosperity, and the promised land, they did not serve God with a joyful and glad heart. Ultimately, they lost their gratitude.
Section 6. Practical Life Lessons. Applying the Wisdom Today.
Let's bring all of this right into our own lives to see what actionable wisdom we can pull from this ancient text. Because, obviously, while we may not be standing on the physical banks of the Jordan River about to sign a national treaty, the spiritual psychology of Deuteronomy 28 applies so directly to how we live today. We learn that it just isn't enough to go through the motions. We have to genuinely appreciate our blessings and serve with real joy. When things are going great, it is so incredibly easy to become complacent, right? To forget where our abundance comes from, and to let our hearts grow arrogant or bitter. This chapter teaches us that we have to practice deep, intentional gratitude, especially in times of plenty. It forces us to acknowledge that our actions, both the good ones and the bad ones, have compounding, very real consequences over time. Cultivating a joyful heart isn't just some nice poetic idea. It is the very safeguard that keeps us grounded and connected to our true purpose.
And finally, Section 7. Recap, a swift summary.
Let's just take a moment to look back at the grand dichotomy we just explored in this explainer. We've walked through one of the absolute most foundational chapters in the entire biblical text, seeing exactly what was put on the table for the Israelites. Moses presented Israel with a breathtaking choice, mapping out the precise results of their future actions. Choose one path, obey, and you will experience a rapid cascade of blessings. You get security, abundance, full harvests, and global respect. Choose the other path, turn away, and you face a slow, agonizing, and escalating spiral of curses, moving from drought and wasting disease to madness to foreign invasion, a horrific siege, and ultimately a tragic, heartbreaking return to the exact slavery you were originally rescued from.
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.